Oh,
Hi.
oh, do you hear an echo?
Um, no, do you?
Okay, it's probably my phone. I think we're good now.
Okay, good. I was pausing.
Good one.
So, we're going to talk about the power of the pause. And it doesn't mean the pause in speech and when we're talking, it's the power of the inner pause that we're talking about and how to live mindfully. So, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I think this is going to be a good conversation between the two of us to figure out how this can work in our lives and expand our joy and intelligence and peace and all kinds of stuff. I know that's your experience, that the pause has made a big difference in your life as well as my own, right?
Yep. So I'm interested in finding out what is the difference between a verbal pause and then an inner pause.
I like I like that you showed us the inner pause, I mean the outer pause. So I want to start out with my favorite quote that it's one of my favorite quotes, and I've talked about it before, but I want to make sure I don't mess it up. I think I have it memorized, but it's from Viktor Frankl, and it is this: between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Hmm.
So that's what I mean by the inner pause. Between stimulus and response, having a place where we're able to be still inside. Because if we're not still inside, then we're just going on automatic pilot and we're just lost in thoughts. And usually, when we're lost in thoughts, we think the same thoughts that we thought yesterday. And because of that, we do the same things that we did yesterday. We're stuck in a rut. And the most important thing to mention, I think, is that we're not able to take life in to the degree that we can when we stop and we pause. So everything that truly matters in life, I think, is to be found in that pause between thoughts, the place where we can be still inside, the place where we can take a deep breath, stop. And so this quote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. So that space is something happens, and there's if we don't, there, the way I would change that quote is between stimulus and response there can be a space, but sometimes there isn't a space, and when there's not a space we're just reactive to life, and we really don't have a choice, because what he says is between stimulus and response there is the power to choose our response, and that power to choose our response, that's really the time when we can actually choose, is when there is a pause. Otherwise we're just acting, we're lost in our thoughts, and we're just going on, we're just going, just like I said, on automatic pilot. But the response, in that response lies our growth and our freedom. So growth is how, that's how we change, is in that this pause. That's how we can have a choice to do something different. So from a neurological perspective, our neurons are doing a certain thing. There's like a groove, and the way a psychologist friend of mine had explained it to me, it's like if you're on a dirt road and it's the same vehicles go the same place. That's the way the neural pathways go, because they're in a groove. But the only way we can make our neural pathways go a different way, which means change something in our life for the better that we want to change, is to take that pause and say, okay, I want to go a different way. And so from a neurological perspective, that plays in there also. And so our growth, I just talked about that, but our freedom, which means, like I was saying, everything that matters, joy, peace, love, the things that really matter, what we're really seeking, and we can talk about this in more depth, is what we find in the space between thoughts in that pause. So I know I just said a lot.
Well, you're speaking my nerd language, and I'm going to take it back a little bit when it comes down to the neurology of it. It just so happened that my little boy at 3 years old went a little bit apeshit. We got kicked out of preschools. He was he became like the sweet little baby into a super aggressive child, beating up kids, hurting everybody around him. So I immediately got on the ball and we got an appointment with a neurologist. And the neurologist was saying that he was so overly stimulated, which is pretty much what's going on with most of the kids and adults, not labeled as ADHD or autistic, because at that age he was too young to be diagnosed. But the way what you're talking about, that pause, was that he was not able to put that pause, the inner or the outer, because the stimulation around him was just so much that the neurological feedback that was happening in the brain did not have an opportunity to connect to the body. So the body was not processing the feedback that it was getting in there. So these are things that, because we went through our process as we were younger, more than likely misdiagnosed, or maybe there wasn't enough information to be able to have that type of proper diagnosis. As soon as that diagnosis came in, we were able to help him by giving him 5 days a week of occupational therapy, music therapy, and behavioral therapy to learn those coping mechanisms. So now he has mindful techniques at his disposal. He knows how to breathe. We do the counting, we do all sorts of things because we were able to tackle it. We were guided to go get assessed, and I went straight to our neurologist. So one of the things I wanted to point out is we're not born with these techniques. We just happened to, because my son was so aggressive at age 3, we didn't know what to do. We just ended up falling in the right hands at the right time, and we were giving the resources and the tools to help cope him. Now we're adults, right? And now we need to accept ourselves as not being able to, not having the proper way to respond. Right now we have the means to react. So this is where that comes in with that inner pause. We don't have the training to have that inner pause. We have to come to that training. We have to come to the realization that we don't have that skill.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we figure out that we're missing that skill?
Well, you just said a lot. That's quite amazing that you had somebody to a doctor to help you with that, and that he went to mindfulness, because it is such a basic skill that we aren't taught in school, and we're not taught. It's just starting to be taught at places of work, and there are mindfulness. It's so practical, and it's so user friendly, and it's a tool that can really change our lives in a lot of ways. But to answer your question, how do we know? Well, one way to know is if we're acting, number one, acting in ways that we would rather not act, and it almost feels like we don't have a choice.
Hmm.
We're feeling ways that we don't want to feel, which means depression, anxiety, a lot of sadness, or even grief. We have to go through our process emotionally. But if emotions are just sticking around for a really long time, and we feel like we don't have a choice, that's another. So acting, feeling, being lost in thoughts, and or even being lost in action. So being lost in thoughts is, just thinking the same things over and over again, and obsessing about the same thoughts. And if there's thoughts going through our mind, asking ourselves, are these thoughts that I would rather not have? And the question is, could you introduce more choice into that through mindfulness? And even there can be action that can be sort of like when we run around like a chicken with our heads cut off. We run around, and we're overly stimulated, but really doesn't seem to be as much of a purpose. Even our intentions, we don't follow through
Mhm.
with them. So again, it's like we've lost the power to choose. So between stimulus and response, there is a space if we introduce it, but that space has to be introduced through what your son is learning and what we all learn. So I think really the to simplify that answer, suffering,
Hmm.
which means needless pain that we have, and actions that we regret. If I was to sum it up, that's what I would say.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great answer. That's what do they say? That life is the best experience, right? You don't know what you don't know unless you go through it, unless you experience it. Which is now that I experienced it with my son, I think that also helped me kind of look retrospectively as to my life as well and my as myself. I'm still dealing with patterns or behaviors of going back and thinking the same thing over and over and over again. I'm still remembering the past, and when you don't move away from the past, then you kind of block yourself from the future because you're continuing a cycle, you're continuing a pattern at that point.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. The past is drug into the future, and
Yeah.
it's almost predictable. You know, we do the same things, we say the same things. We all know what it's like to go to a class reunion or to go back to where we grew up or whatever it is. And you know, you see people doing, and it's not that I'm not guilty of this too, but people saying the same things they said when they were in high school or college. They're doing the same things. They're complaining about the same things. So I would venture to say that there is a need for more presence, more pause, more space in our lives to be able to introduce something new. Um, I think it's worth saying also that scientists report that some of the biggest breakthroughs that they have are when there's a space of not thinking. So and I know I'm preaching to the choir, you know, with you telling you this, and you know, so how how has space really introducing more space, more pause internally affected your life?
So So that's a great question because here's the deal. When you have a lot going on, you have a family, you have kids in sports or whatever, the only pause a person may take the time to do is really when the kids are finally asleep, and then you can just sit down. And at that point, you turn on the TV and you're out, for the most part. The biggest joke now for Gen Xers is they won't go out unless they're back home by 9 o'clock, right? So because we're tired. So, but when you get to that space, then you have to condition yourself to be in that space. It's not just simple of just pausing in there. Now you have to train yourself to learn how to meditate and how to be okay with the thoughts that go in your mind and not engaging in it. But to answer your question, being in that pause has changed my life completely. So much so that when I get those thoughts, those patterns where I'm still thinking, and I'm actually posting a YouTube on there today that I've incorporated an NLP technique, which is a neuro linguistic programming of the rubber band. So the moment I get a technique, a thought, whether it's limiting belief, negative belief, or reliving the past, I will snap myself literally out of it. So I'm fully aware. Now the trick is how fast can I move on from that? How fast can I make myself aware? To me, that's probably more effective now than pausing, because what pausing does is allow you to be aware or mindful of your thoughts. So now you get better at catching yourself before you start going into this pattern and you start going into this whole snowball effect of and continuing that conversation that you probably never had, already had, and never will have,
Well, yeah, that's your Zen stick. You know how the
Yeah.
Zen masters, if they see somebody drifting off in meditation, or if somebody asks a question that seems sort of mindless that they're not really thinking through, they'll hit them with a stick, which is pretty intense
Mhm.
and probably old school. Just kind of like corporal punishment in a way, but yours is just a smaller version of doing that. And but you're introducing a space, wouldn't you say, when you do that?
Absolutely.
You're acting in a way and you wake yourself up. So another way to say this is waking up. And what are we waking up to? The present moment. So when that snap happens, you wake up, you have to feel what's happening in this moment. The mind may be somewhere else,
Hmm.
but the body is always here. So one way to introduce a pause, and rather than someone, and if anyone listening to this now or later, try it yourself. And one way to do it is to be in your body is to just breathe consciously. And if you breathe consciously, you're here now because the breath is always here now. If you feel your feet on the floor, your feet are here. You're because your body's here,
Hmm.
or your body against the chair. You can really bring somebody into a state of relaxation and joy just by pointing out the mundane things that we don't notice because we get lost in our minds and our emotions. And as you well know, so if I'm feeling my body against the chair right now and I'm feeling my feet against the floor and I notice my breath moving in and out of my body, immediately I'm introducing that pause, that space, and that space is where I can keep myself from being reactive, just like your son. I'm no different from
Hmm.
your son when he was a few years old. And having to, if somebody says something that triggers me, and we can talk more about triggers, to stop and be in the body, be aware of my breath, because that the only thing we know for sure is we are here, and the way we can feel and experience that is in our bodies. So I think that's hugely important. So my point is, when you're snapping yourself, you're getting into your body, you're getting into the present moment, which, as you well know, what you're doing is you're introducing that space and being able to wake yourself up. Because and I want to ask you, when you snap yourself, what's going on inside your mind and your emotions a lot of the time when you do that? What kind of thing?
Like prior or when I stab myself and I snap out of it? Which part?
Prior, when you realize, oh, I need to
Oh,
wake up.
oh my God. I get very frustrated with myself because what ends up happening is every time, and this is almost a daily occurrence, it's a realization of a habit, chronic bad habit that somehow became an addiction, and it's hard to break it. And so I have to go to extreme measures, which is snapping myself with a rubber band to break it. And every time I go that route, I feel like I've moved ahead, but now I'm stepping back, like I've lost ground a few steps because I know that I don't want to be that old version of myself. There's no way I'm that old version of myself. I'm a completely new version of myself. And I don't want to introduce bad habits to my new version of myself, if that makes sense. I don't want to bring in those bad habits,
Yeah.
those things. It's so detrimental to the life. I mean, you provide your own you self-sabotage when you bring those patterns into this new version that you're trying to create. Just kind of like if somebody is sober, you don't want to invite them, hey, you want to go to the bar? No, be respectful. You don't take a sober person to a bar where their issue, their past persona was an alcoholic. You don't want to do that.
Right.
So that's what happens for me. I become I really get hard on myself because I'm like, oh, I know better. And then by the time I catch it, I'm thinking, oh my God, how long was that? Was that like a full hour that I just wasted my life on just doing these thoughts? Because for me, it's just scenarios that will never happen, but just in case, just in case it happen, I'm ready. I'm ready to have some sort of confrontation. So, and I just lose. It's so easy. The mind is on automatic, and before you know it, you've lost yourself into this story, and that's the scary part for me because it could be seconds where I catch myself, or it could be a full hour when I realize, holy crap. And I've noticed a pattern. I notice that when I first wake up and I shower in the shower when I'm the most relaxed because I have like 100 degrees on me, because I like hot showers. I'm so relaxed. I'm the most vulnerable at that point, and that's where my mind just runs relentlessly. I notice that that's my weakest point is when I'm super relaxed and these things in the ego kick in.
Hmm. So that's great to, thanks for sharing that. I've experienced that in the shower too. And I think we have our times when we go on, our minds go into automatic pilot. I've had times when I would like talk to somebody who's not even in the room, like, and my wife or whatever at the time would be, who are you talking to? Oh, nobody, nothing. Look, this is being human because you relate to this too. And I bet you people relate to this because we have to know when we go into automatic pilot. So you were talking about story. Story is a lot of the time when we're not in the pause and we're not being present because the story needs a past and future. It needs this whole. And here's something I want to introduce into our conversation that somebody said to me one time, and I'll never forget it. Sanity is simplicity.
Makes
So that
sense.
gets out of the story. You want to talk to someone who's wise, they speak when they have something to say, they're not afraid of silence. And you notice when someone who's really wise, how much profundity there is in the simple saying of things because the mind moves into complexity. And I think this is important to say what our mind does when we're not present. Our mind moves into complexity. Why? Because we've evolved that way because the mind is always there, to see most of human history, there's something that was going to jump out like a tiger or a lion or whatever it was, or somebody from another tribe that was going to kill us. So there's this worry that our mind does to try to protect us. So our mind is a survival machine saying what could go wrong, what could go wrong. That's one thing that it does.
Mhm.
Or it thinks about something that could be better in the future. But then by definition, when it does that, it's saying, right now isn't okay and I'm not okay. And then it goes like what we do in the shower. Apparently, we both do that. Having conversations with our eighth grade science teacher, and look, it's just human, and just be like, shut up. Oh, well, I'm just talking to somebody who's not in the room. So that happens when we go into the past, and there's suffering on both ends. What's in common? We're not in the future, but look at those examples, and in those examples, the mind is fighting with something. The mind is not
Mhm.
only a survival machine and it thinks it's trying to keep us from saber-toothed tigers, and it's trying to rehearse the distant past, telling us we don't want to go down that other path because that path is where that tiger was before. I mean, that's what our mind is doing, but it's just doing it with that person's an asshole, and I don't like this person, and I didn't like this situation. And when I get to work, I'm going to run into this person, and I don't want this to happen. And if they say this, then I'm going to say this. And that's the kind of thing that our mind does. So what do? With you snap yourself with a rubber band. What I do often is I take a deep breath and then I take another conscious deep breath. And if I'm in the shower, a wise thing for me to do is actually feel the heat of of the water hitting me and hear the sound of the water. That can wake me up because again, the body wakes us up into the present moment. So being here now is how we snap out of that suffering. And the more we come back to the present moment, the more we develop that muscle. And I know this in spiritual circles would be something that would be frowned on, me saying presence is like a muscle, but it really
Really
is.
is.
It really is. It's the practice. And what we find ourselves doing is being able to be more present in a conversation and not and be there for someone and not being as reactive when we've practiced it more. But the best way to practice it is just when we're walking down the street or just when we need to focus on a task, Because if we can't focus on a task or we can't focus on what we're doing when we're walking down the street, then we're sure in the hell not going to be able to stay conscious and aware and in that pause when someone is pushing our buttons or something happens that we don't like. So my point in all of this is our mind wants to fight with the and the way it does it is it gets us out of the present moment, and it's fighting the past, it's fighting the future. But when we're present, we're not fighting with anything, and we're able to bring more creativity, joy, happiness, peace, something that's new into our lives, and we're not stuck in these patterns. This is material that you and I understand very well, but I wonder if we're getting too complex and covering too many subjects. You are good at this, Nada. You're good at bringing things back to the simplicity of what we're talking about. Are we making sense?
Yes, and I want to add more to it. I truly believe that it is muscle programming, 100%, because your mind is a movie and you have selective memory. You know, you'll remember certain things, and certain things that you can't grasp or you don't want to put time into, you won't remember. Um, and then, so I do hope that, this little snapping of the band will eventually finally get me there. I'm picking up things quicker now, which is a great thing. But the other thing that is very important to notice is when we're having those conversations in the shower to the person that doesn't exist there, right? Don't you notice that your body tenses up?
Yes, yes, yes. And I want to just interject something.
Hmm.
You also said relaxation. And when we're relaxed, yes, an influx of thoughts could happen, but also relaxation it can bring presence in and can help us be here now, because one way to know that we are not developing that pause is that we're tense. And bless
Oh, thank
you,
you.
that wakes you up
Yeah,
into the
it
present
does.
moment. I interrupted you though, and I'm sorry, I just had something there. Do you remember what you were saying, or do you want to move
Yeah,
on?
you have the what is it, psychosomatic, physical psychosomatic symptoms at that point, because you get so involved in that thought process, that thinking that you're going through, that all of a sudden you're no longer relaxed. And I think relaxation can work both ways. One, which is to bring you in the presence, but at the same time when you're too relaxed, both mind and body, like in the shower, that you don't you fall out of the awareness because you're kind of just you're decompressing, you let go. And because the muscle is not trained yet to stop those thoughts or bring it back on its own, you may have to have external techniques, like you have the feeling of the heat on you, and I have my rubber band or whatever. That can also, the relaxation can also work against us in that sense. So it's really what I'm trying to say is that it's really programming the mind. It really is a muscle, because we're so used to working with two different hemispheres. You have the left brain and the right brain, but they're really supposed to be working together. But we have been going through our lives, focusing on thinking logically and not thinking creatively or in an empathic way. So I feel like that is one of the things, because you're going through this logic. If this, then that, right? If I would have been back in time, and that person said this to me, I would have said this.
Right.
And that's what we end up having, those conversations in the shower. So we're really at that point letting the left brain lead us
Hmm.
versus the right brain letting it flow and go. Does that make sense?
The left brain lead us rather than the right brain letting us go with the flow. So do you see the left brain as something that's more likely to get us out of the present moment?
Yeah, for sure, because you're analyzing what? In the shower, a conversation that never occurred or hasn't occurred or happened 30 years ago. And now you're analyzing that specific situation to how you would have reacted, or now or now you're reacting to it. You're like, wait a minute, that person said this, asshole. He was actually being condescending, and I never caught it back then. But something snapped in your memory bank that you brought that conversation in from like eighth grade. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Well, there. I think there are two times. You're talking about the left brain, the logic, and I'm not a neuroscientist, nor am I a psychiatrist or anything like that. So I don't want to get into the logistics of it. But one way to talk about this is we have our logical brain, which we could say more left brain, and then we have our emotions, which
Mhm.
could be associated more with right brain. And some of us are hooked up more to be more lost in thought. And I know you well, and I know that this is the way your mind works. My mind happens to work where I get lost in emotions a little bit more often than I
Mhm.
get lost in logic. So it depends. Now, if
Good point.
anybody who's watching right now, if you can sense the difference between Nada and me, there is a little bit more, like there's more emotion that comes through with me, and there's more intellectual strength that comes through with you. And we it's good to observe this about ourselves and see, where do I get stuck? Do I get stuck? And this is from my Enneagram training too, where we're thinkers, we're feelers,
Mhm.
emotional, and we're doers. So, and I'm thought is more here. Emotion is more based in the heart area, dare I say chakra, but it's not woo-woo. It is real energy centers, just like with acupuncture.
Mhm.
There's real energy centers. And then in our belly, that's more associated with action. So do we get lost in our actions? Do we get lost in our emotions? Or do we get lost in our thinking more? And uh whatever, see, that was your truth. Your truth is that you know, logic is where you can get lost. I can get lost in the drama of things in my own psyche, and some people can get lost in uh just doing, or even lack of doing. But that's where some things can get stuck for someone else. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up real
Mm.
quick. Unless you wanted to, did you want to
No.
respond to that, or can I move on to, okay, great. So there is something else that you brought up that I think is such a good point, is the relaxation. And you also earlier brought up watching TV and how we want to escape. So when we go, and Eckhart Tolle talks about this, we go more back to our animal nature, which isn't, you know, with our prefrontal cortex that we have, where we can be more present, because an animal is pre-thought, and we can become present, which is really, and I'm really taking this from Eckhart Tolle, which is post thought, which is rising above thought, which is, that is more being awake and aware and present. And so start to notice yourself when you are in the moment. There is an alertness. It's not so much attention, but it's an alertness. And we're not falling into this where we can go when we're daydreaming. But what I want to point out is, we can, there are two directions that we go. And I want to try to keep this very as simple as I can. We can go, we can be lost in thought, and to get out of the pain, we can binge on Netflix, we can smoke a joint, we can drink, we can have compulsive sex, watch porn, whatever it is that people do, and that all humans indulge in some way, shape, or form of doing this, or even get lost in just daydreaming, or whatever. This is almost pre-thought, because when we're watching that TV, we're thinking the thoughts of the TV. And I'm taking this from Eckhart Tolle, because he's so brilliant at talking about this. And when we are drinking or smoking a joint, we slow down the thinking process.
Mhm.
And when we are having sex or jumping out of it, I mean, there's nothing wrong with sex, but compulsive porn watching can get compulsive. And the reason there's that compulsion is because we're trying to escape our minds. When we bungee jump out or jump out of a plane, we're stopping our thoughts. These are ways to escape and go pre-thought. Presence, which is alertness, is being here now. And that's really rising above thought. And that's where you can be evolved and have more of a choice. When we get drunk, there's a reason why when we're drunk, we do stupid shit, we say stupid things. And I was just talking to a friend of mine who was talking to somebody who was dealing with a drunk person. And that we all know, anyone who's drank knows what it's like to be embarrassed about what happened the night before at some point in their life. It's been a lot of years for me, but I do remember what that's like. So the task in being a mindful person is, rather than escaping as much, and we have to escape out of our minds by trying to slow down our thoughts through the things I mentioned, is to be more aware, where we bring that pause, that choice. And that is by being aware of our senses, being aware of our body, and being aware of this moment. That's where we find an alert peace and a choice. And we have all those things that I've been mentioning, like creativity and something new and breaking the patterns that come in. So I just thank you for indulging me in that, but I wanted to point that out.
Okay, so now we're at the point where you're talking about, I'm going to say it, the reptilian brain, which is the animal brain. We have animal instincts, which is going back into the escapism, because first, we don't know how to pause. We don't know we need to pause. We don't know how to make the connection of what pausing does. So I'm just kind of like
Yeah.
reiterating everything in real quick. So instead of looking inwardly to address the pausing, they were going to do things that is a quick fix. Is basically a band-aid, which is, porn, drinking, smoking a joint, whatever it is. And it's a real thing, because you're right, it does slow down the brain activity. It takes you away from whatever it is you don't like in the day, or you just don't want to deal with it. So we're going to go back to the alertness. If you are in an animal instinct process or whatever, where how do we get the alert like Eckhart Tolle states?
Yeah. Well, you snapped yourself with a rubber band. That's one way to do it.
That's
Take
me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask you. I'm going to answer a question with a question. What do you do?
Besides the rubber band, I do a lot of the basic stuff. I do journaling, meditation. I do a lot of I listen to music. I've actually started listening to classical music, piano, for whatever reason. I'm not a classical music person, but there's something about the piano that puts a stillness in my mind. I'm actually not thinking about anything. I go with the flow of the music.
Mhm.
And then I started thinking, am I bypassing something? Am I not processing something? But I'm not. I'm just going into that moment of stillness in that moment to to not think of anything. Pretty much it.
Yeah.
I also redirect my thoughts through music, through other types of music. So music that really pumps me up, what I call power songs. I will put that on to redirect the thoughts. So I'm transmuting that energy, that thought process, to something more positive and
Mm-hmm.
more powerful, more liberating at that point. So those are the things that I do, aside from my
Mm-hmm.
rubber band that came from an asparagus bunch. But music is really something that I've turned into. And I think I told you, like, I started learning music, started learning, teaching myself guitar and piano. And
Good for
I
you.
think that's why I'm kind of transitioning more, instead of just the that I'm used to, now I'm exploring more options.
Yeah. Yeah. So you listen to music. Music brings you probably into your body, into your
Mhm.
emotions,
Yeah.
which that's somewhere you don't live as much. So it brings you into your emotions. Being doing something that we love can bring us sports can bring us into our body. I do want to say a little side note. If you ask any golfer, you ask a basketball genius like Michael Jordan when he was playing, or you ask, I saw Michael Jackson when he was being interviewed by Oprah. They said, "What are you thinking about?" The answer with Michael Jackson said, "I- I'm not thinking about anything," and but that wasn't a very good Michael Jackson impression. But he wasn't. He doesn't think when he's dancing. He doesn't think when he's writing music. It comes to him.
Mhm.
Shout out to my buddy Josh Bloomberg if he's listening to this. He's a brilliant songwriter, and he said things just kind of come to him. That's because there's that pause.
Yep.
When someone talks about being in the zone, whether it's when in playing a sport or you're up there talking. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm not saying that I'm completely in the zone, but if I trust, I have no idea what's going to happen or what I'm going to say when we're doing these. But if I trust and I just can be in the pause and just let things come to me, I'm going to be a lot more helpful to other people. So this is called being in the zone. So to answer your question, how are ways that we can do this? Well, ways to practice it in just general mindfulness. And it's helpful to just remember mindfulness is about being conscious, and conscious is being aware of what you're doing. It's having a choice. To reiterate, breath, sensations. Open your sensations. When you're washing your hands, smell the soap. Again, I'm taking that from Eckhart Tolle. Listen, feel the temperature of the water. When you're sitting, feel the weight of your body against the chair. When you're listening to someone, really listen. And here's the thing also I want to bring up, because you said this very well. This is what our minds do. We can drift off, like maybe we're listening to a conversation, but what our mind does, because it fights things, it goes into to resisting the present moment. The best way to resist it, if we find ourselves drifting off, if the mind is in charge, then the mind is going to beat us up and say, "Oh, you can't do this. You screwed up. You took 5 steps back. You're not conscious. Why don't I just give this up?" Know that when you bring yourself back to the present moment, whether it's in a conversation, whether it's when you're lost and you don't know you're walking down the street, when you're walking down the street, when you're eating something unconsciously and you're just stuffing yourself because you're not aware of what you're doing rather than just being aware that you're eating. All of these things, when we don't have awareness in what we're doing, when we know that the mind is going to drift off and we're going to get an automatic pilot, but when we bring attention back, that's the success.
Yep.
We have succeeded. If we're meditating, and meditation is nothing other, in my opinion, for the most part, most meditations are about bringing ourselves back to that pause, which means bringing ourselves back to the moment. So what happens? Well, we just get lost in thoughts. We're thinking without knowing we're thinking, then we just bring it back. We think and then we just bring it back. Just knowing every time we do that is a success. The more we do that, the stronger we get at being in the pause. And the more we're in the pause, the more we can bring that freedom and choice into our lives. The more we can have an ability to really be there with a human being, the more we can really be there and break our patterns, the more we can really be there and have a sense of awe when we're looking at a sunset, or we can be there and we're able to have creativity that comes into our lives rather than just saying things based on and doing things based on what we've done in the past.
And you bring up a good point, because I'm going to reiterate with meditation, because I hear this all the time, and I don't know how to meditate. I can't meditate. And this goes back to what you were saying. It's a muscle. When you drift off in your thought process and then you bring it back, you are already changing the chemistry in the brain. Not only are you changing the chemistry of the brain, you're creating new neural pathways.
Yes.
You're creating new
Mhm.
connections. You are, without even realizing, rewiring your brain. And this is what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about all the time: rewiring your brain. As a matter of fact, go off and think off, oh, as you're meditating, oh, you're doing your own, and like, oh my gosh, did I call that person back? Bring it back. New neuron pathway has just been created or connected. So
Mhm.
it's a great practice. And that is a good challenge. And I think you're right to look at those as little successes, little achievements, because if you're, like everything else, practice makes perfect, right? If you keep on practicing, it becomes, those conversations that we're having in the shower with no one there become less and less, or they become shorter and shorter, which is what I'm experiencing, that those conversations that I'm having with no one, they're getting shorter and I'm able to catch it real quick. So to me, that's a win. A
Yes.
frustration still, because I'm like, ugh, I know better than this. How much time was that? Was that like an hour, 2 hours, or 2 minutes? But it's a great way to help you and feel better about yourself too. You build that confidence that you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm beautiful. Thank you for saying all that. So I'm going to be your student. I want to ask you. So
Mhm.
if I'm somebody, I know you don't want to be, and neither one of us want to be teachers, but we're going to just do role playing, and I'm going to just say, "Hey, Nada," and I know I've shared on my side of things, but Nada, why be in this pause? What am I going to get out of it? I've got stuff to do. I've got bills to pay. I've got people I've got to ingratiate myself with, and I've got to do the dishes. Why is this helpful to me?
If you ever want to see what success can really feel like and to help you become a better version of yourself, why would you not want to do it with just a small sacrifice, which is just to take 5 minutes of your day to just sit in silence?
What's silence going to do for me, Nada?
It's going to make you aware of where you have patterns that you need to break so you can become successful in life, because at the end of the day, we're all we want is more money. We want success, we want that financial freedom, we want to be happy, we want to be in love, we want to be everything. But honestly, you can't find love until you love yourself first, because the people that you're going to attract are going to match you to where you are internally. The money that you want, you can't keep stay with you if you're not appreciative or you're not able to receive the money. So this pause brings you to that awareness of where you can work on yourself to become those things that you would want to be, if you want to be. If you don't want to do that, if you just want to stay where you're at, then that's okay too.
Yeah.
Maybe pausing is not a thing for them.
Well, and if money's your thing, if love is your thing, if family is your thing, if free time is your thing, whatever it is. But I also want to just also say that what we're looking for when we reach that success, what we're looking for through that drink or that cigarette, what we're looking for by traveling, or did I say love yet? I don't know. But all the things that we want in our life, they're in us.
Mm-hmm.
They're in us. And they can be found in that pause. They can be found in the space between our thoughts. And the way to do it, the way to be okay no matter what, is the same way to start to bring more choice into our lives. So can can you work on improving your life without the pause in your life? Sure, you can, but there's a price to pay.
Mm-hmm.
There's a price to pay, and that is, well, I'll just invite anyone to look at someone who's extremely quote successful. What we call success in our culture is different from what other people call success in different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in Fiji, people sure wouldn't say success was, because I lived in huts with the people who were living there, and they did not live in competition and they didn't live in winning. But we have a very privileged society where we can think about things like, creating more abundance and things like that. But the what I invite anyone to look at is, when someone is what we call successful, are they happy? And happiness and success together can only be, I would ask someone to look into, maybe that can be only achieved through bringing some more mindfulness in space, because otherwise we're looking for fulfillment in the next moment.
Mm-hmm. A band-aid. It's another band-aid.
Yeah, yeah. One day I'm going to be happy. One day I'm going to be happy, and but not now. But you know, I'm looking out at a mountain right now, and the breeze is blowing this beautiful tree, and I'm having a great conversation with you. Even though I could start thinking about the fact that I have to pack and I'm moving in 2 days.
Oh,
But
you are?
and that could stress, yeah, that could stress me out. Yeah, I believe me, I'm very glad that you're just looking right here. There are boxes and things all over the damn place. It's a mess.
Oh. So let's wrap this up real quick. Um, Pause. I think pause, and I'm going to put it in a very spiritual sense, is the gateway to the beyond, to your beyond. But your beyond has always been inside. So if you want to go beyond who you are right now, if you're not satisfied with where you are, you got to look inside first to take that moment to take inventory of inside of you so that you can just go beyond what you've ever expected out of yourself, moved on, to become a better person.
That's the dropping of the mic. I think that was great. That was great what you said. Beyond where we feel stuck, because we all
Mm-hmm.
feel
Yep.
stuck. And there's that, and our stuckness, really, our whole experience comes from our mind. Our experience of life and the choices we make come from our mind. So the what can happen if we're stuck in emotions, thoughts, choices, relationships, jobs, whatever it is, if we are stuck, the way to get out of that is to develop pause. The cool thing about it is we'll develop more of a choice, but at the same time, we will be happier now because
Mm-hmm.
now is the only thing that exists.
That's it. That's it. So, Kent, if people want to get a hold of you, where do they get a hold of you?
I'm going to spell my name and it's .com, KentSchebel.com, KentScheibel.com. It's so funny you should ask, Nada. How can people get in touch with you?
I just want you to subscribe and like my YouTube at Guided Counsel, GuidedCounsel. That's where I'm getting my following. That's where I have bomb ass interviews happening. I upload our Instagram lives there, so it's cool. It's a cool source of information for people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're stopping a little sooner because it cuts us off.
They
And
cut
it's,
this off.
yeah. Yeah. So any final thoughts that you can think of?
Um, the I think we did an Instagram live where we talked about the neuroscience of the brain. The mind is powerful if you let it be powerful. And you said it earlier before that it takes charge of our lives when we should be the ones taking charge of it.
Yes, yes. Either your mind is using you or you are using your mind. That is a really helpful thing to remember. And if you take anything from this is just my experience. That I would say take a conscious deep breath, or maybe two, and this could
Or get a
put that
paper
into.
bag. Just hyperventilate.
Well, I was also, when you were talking about the rubber band, I was gonna make a joke and say that I bring a whip with me and whip
Oh
myself
my
in.
God. Old school.
So we are doing episode 20 next in 2 weeks, and so we will be talking about another subject, which is to be
Yep.
determined. So thank you all, everybody, for joining us, and Nada, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. It's been a pleasure. Good luck on your move.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.